Deep in the farthest corner of the galaxy, there was a planet named Varellus. It was once a thriving world, full of life and wonder. Its inhabitants, the Ketheri, were an advanced and peaceful species, known for their remarkable intelligence and their deep connection to nature. They had long been part of the Galactic Council, working with other civilizations to maintain peace and explore new frontiers. The Ketheri were respected for their wisdom, and their planet was a shining example of harmony between technology and the environment. However, that was all before the disaster struck. A massive asteroid, much larger than any the Ketheri had seen before, slammed into Varellus, changing everything. The impact destroyed vast regions of the planet, poisoning the atmosphere and creating unstable conditions. The once beautiful cities crumbled, and the natural balance that the Ketheri had carefully maintained was shattered. The Ketheri turned to the Galactic Council for help, but their cries for aid were ignored. The Council had no interest in helping a world that was no longer of use to them. They dismissed the Ketheri's situation as a natural disaster and assumed the species would either find a way to survive or fade away. Other planets and civilizations, focused on their own problems, paid no attention to the Ketheri's suffering. Years passed, and the Ketheri were abandoned. Their numbers dwindled as the planet's ecosystem slowly died. Many of the younger generation, filled with hope, attempted to rebuild, but the damage was too great. The Ketheri were forced to retreat underground, where they lived in makeshift shelters, relying on outdated technology and their knowledge of bioengineering to survive. Varellus became a forgotten world, marked only by faint distress signals that no one cared to answer. In a nearby part of the galaxy, Captain Elias Drake of the Earth Alliance was leading a routine exploration mission with his crew aboard the Liberty, a ship known for charting uncharted systems. As they passed through the sector near Varellus, Elias received a strange signal. It was weak but unmistakable, a distress signal coming from a planet that had been listed as uninhabited for centuries. Elias was curious. Earth had heard of the Ketheri once, long ago, but the news of their decline had barely reached the ears of many. Still, something about the signal felt different, urgent even. He decided to investigate. The Liberty dropped out of hyperspace near the planet's orbit. At first glance, Varellus appeared lifeless, with brown clouds swirling around its surface and vast stretches of barren land below. It was hard to believe that this world had ever been a thriving hub of civilization. The crew prepared to land, and soon they touched down in a valley surrounded by mountain ranges. What they found shocked them. The Ketheri, once a proud and powerful race, now looked fragile. Most of them were living in large underground caverns, their buildings cracked and half destroyed. The air was thick with dust, and the once lush forests were now nothing more than scorched earth. The Ketheri's faces were marked with sadness, but there was also a quiet strength in their eyes. They had not given up, even when the galaxy had long since abandoned them. When Elias stepped out of the ship, he was met by a tall Ketheri woman. Her skin shimmered faintly with a soft green glow, a trait typical of her species, but her eyes were filled with weariness. This was Vela, the leader of the Ketheri. She had heard stories of humanity before, but like many others, she had written them off as just another young species, unprepared to deal with the problems of the galaxy. She eyed Elias warily as he approached. He could feel the weight of her gaze as though she was sizing him up, trying to determine if he was like all the others. Promises of help with no real intention of following through. "Who are you?" Vela asked, her voice calm but firm. "I'm Captain Elias Drake of the Earth Alliance," he replied, introducing himself. "We received your distress signal. We're here to help." Vela narrowed her eyes. "Help? After all these years? Why should we believe you, human? Every other civilization turned their backs on us." Elias didn't flinch. He had seen this kind of distrust before, but he wasn't going to back down. "I know you've been abandoned, but Earth isn't like the rest of the galaxy. We don't leave people behind." There was a long silence between them. Vela studied him carefully, and then, after what seemed like an eternity, She nodded. You are the first to come. Elias could see the weight of her words, the burden of having waited so long for someone to step in. He had no intention of letting them down. I promise, he said, we will help you rebuild. Earth will provide the resources, and will protect you from the rest of the galaxy. You won't be alone anymore. Vela's expression softened, but doubt lingered in her eyes. She had heard promises before. The only difference now was that this human had shown up, while the rest of the galaxy hadn't even bothered to send a response. Elias stood still, watching Vela, the Ketheri leader, as she took in his words. Her face, once filled with skepticism, was slowly softening, though doubt still lingered in her eyes. The years of abandonment had worn her down. She had learned to expect little from others, especially from those who had once promised help but never delivered. Earth was far away, and the idea that a new civilization would step in to save them seemed almost too good to be true. I understand your doubts, Elias said, breaking the silence. But I'm here, and Earth isn't like the other galactic powers. We value life, no matter where it comes from. If we can help, we will. Vela studied him for a long moment, then gave a short nod. Follow me. Elias motioned to his crew to stay close as Vela led them through the tunnels of the Ketheri's underground city. The path was narrow and dimly lit, with walls that seemed to pulse with a strange bioluminescent glow. It was a reminder of the planet's once thriving beauty, but now it was a mere shadow of what it had been. As they walked, Elias couldn't help but notice the way the Ketheri moved, slower, more cautious, as if the weight of the years had taken a toll on their bodies as much as their spirits. They passed by several small communities of Ketheri, all living in the dark, their homes built from the ruins of what had once been grand structures. The sight was both heartbreaking and humbling. Elias could see that many of the Ketheri were still trying to hold on to their dignity, despite their circumstances. Their clothing, while simple, was carefully crafted, and their expressions were focused, as if they still held on to a sense of purpose. Do you still believe your people can rebuild? Elias asked Vela as they walked. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she guided them into a large chamber at the heart of the underground city. The room was filled with screens and old dusty equipment, an archive of the Ketheri's knowledge and history. This was once a research center, she said, her voice quiet. It's where we studied everything about our planet and how to restore it. But now, she trailed off, her gaze falling to the ground. Elias approached one of the consoles and gently wiped away the dust. You've kept it all safe, though. That's incredible. Vela looked up at him, a faint smile tugging at her lips. We've done our best, but resources are limited. What we have here is knowledge. Knowledge that was once shared with other civilizations. Knowledge that they no longer care for. Elias nodded. He could feel the weight of her words. The Ketheri had tried to share their discoveries with the galaxy, but no one had been willing to listen. Their knowledge, once valuable, had been dismissed as irrelevant, and now it was gathering dust. Yet, despite everything, the Ketheri had held on. That was the true strength of the species, resilience in the face of overwhelming adversity. We can help with that, Elias said, his voice firm. The resources Earth has may not be infinite, but we're committed to using them wisely. Together, we can restore this planet, and we can ensure that the Ketheri will never be abandoned again. Vela looked at him, her expression thoughtful. And why should we trust you? She asked, her voice filled with the kind of quiet challenge that only a leader could carry. Elias met her gaze without hesitation. Because Earth doesn't turn its back on people. We believe in second chances, and this is yours. I'm here to offer that to you and your people. There was a long pause. Then, with a deep breath, Vela finally nodded. All right, Captain Elias Drake. I'll take your word for now. But know this, if you betray us, there will be consequences. Elias smiled, a bit of relief washing over him. He had expected this level of wariness, and it made sense. Trust had to be earned, especially after all the pain the Ketheri had endured. But he was confident that Earth's aid would prove genuine, and soon the Ketheri would see it too. As they began to discuss plans for the future, Elias learned more about the Ketheri's unique abilities. Their knowledge of bioengineering was far beyond anything humanity had developed. They had once been able to terraform entire regions of their planet, making the land lush and fertile, with crops that could survive in even the harshest conditions. They had also discovered sustainable energy sources that harnessed the power of Varela's natural forces, allowing them to live in harmony with their planet's ecosystem. But the asteroid had destroyed much of that infrastructure, and without help, it seemed impossible to restore. Yet Elias was determined. Earth had resources that could complement the Ketheri's knowledge. Advanced machines that could help rebuild cities, clean the atmosphere, and restore ecosystems. "What do you need the most?" Elias asked. Vela didn't hesitate. "Food and clean water are our top priorities. Without those, our people can't survive much longer. Then we need to rebuild our infrastructure, our cities, our energy systems, and we need to start regrowing the land. The soil is toxic, and the crops won't grow." Elias nodded, taking notes. "We can start with food and water. I'll send a team to begin work on that right away. We'll also send Earth's best engineers to help with the rest, and we'll bring the right equipment to help with the soil." Vela looked at him, her expression softening. "It's a lot of work. Are you sure you're ready for it?" Elias smiled, a sense of pride in his chest. "We're ready. We'll do everything we can to help." As the discussion continued, Elias could see the first signs of hope flicker in Vela's eyes. For the first time in a long while, the Ketheri saw a way forward, a chance to rebuild, to start again. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. The crew of the Liberty worked tirelessly alongside the Ketheri, beginning the complex task of restoring life to the planet. Elias and Vela met every morning to discuss the progress, and the air around them seemed to buzz with a sense of purpose. For the first time in years, there was hope. Hope that the Ketheri might rise from the ashes of their broken world and rebuild their once thriving civilization. Elias could see the difference in the Ketheri almost immediately. Their faces, once full of sorrow and doubt, now held a glimmer of renewed spirit. The Earth Alliance had brought with them the latest technology, air purification machines, advanced water filtration systems, and large-scale farming equipment. It wasn't enough to restore everything in a day, but it was a start. As the days passed, Elias spent more time with Vela. They shared stories about their respective worlds, their cultures, and their dreams. Vela spoke with pride about the Ketheri's connection to nature, their ability to understand and manipulate the world around them. Elias, in turn, told her about Earth's history, about how humanity had once struggled to survive, much like the Ketheri had, before coming together and creating a thriving, united world. "We're not so different, you and I," Elias said one afternoon, as they walked through a grove of newly planted trees, the first signs of life beginning to take root in the soil. Vela smiled softly, though there was still a trace of sadness in her eyes. "I never thought I'd see the day when I would trust a human. But here we are." Elias chuckled. "Well, we've got to start somewhere, right?" They reached a clearing where a group of Ketheri engineers were working on a series of machines designed to help restore the planet's atmosphere. The air on Varellus was still toxic in many areas, and it would take months, even years, to fully cleanse it. But with the help of Earth's technology, the process had already begun. Elias watched as the machines hummed to life, releasing streams of purified air into the atmosphere. It was a small victory, but it felt significant. "I think this is the beginning of something great," Elias said, his eyes lighting up with excitement. Vela nodded, though she remained cautious. "It's a step forward, but we have much work to do. The Ketheri have always been known for our resilience, but we've lost so much. Our culture, our way of life. It's all been reduced to dust. Will we ever be able to reclaim it?" Elias paused for a moment, then placed a hand gently on her shoulder. Reclaiming what's been lost won't be easy, but I believe in you, Vela. You've already shown so much strength, and together we can make it happen. Earth won't leave you like the others did. We're in this for the long haul. Vela looked at him, a spark of determination flickering in her eyes. You truly believe that? I do, Elias said firmly. I wouldn't be here if I didn't. Over the next few weeks, the Ketheri began to adapt to the changes brought by Earth's technology. The once dying crops began to sprout, nourished by the new water systems and soil treatments. The air was cleaner, and the Ketheri could once again breathe freely without fear of suffocating. Slowly, the planet started to heal. But the work was far from finished. The Ketheri had lost much of their infrastructure, and rebuilding their cities was an enormous challenge. Elias knew it would take years, maybe even decades, to restore everything. But with each passing day, he saw the Ketheri becoming more confident, more willing to believe that a brighter future was possible. One evening, as the sun set over the horizon, Elias and Vela stood together on a hill overlooking a newly restored field of crops. The colors of the sunset reflected off the fresh plants, creating a peaceful and hopeful scene. You've done more than I could have ever hoped for, Vela said quietly, her voice full of gratitude. I never imagined I'd see the day when Varellus would begin to bloom again. But now it feels possible. Elias smiled, his gaze fixed on the horizon. It's not just me. It's the people of Earth. We all believe in you and your people. We believe in your future. Vela turned to him, her expression soft. I never thought I would trust a human, but you've earned that trust. You've given us something we thought we had lost forever. Elias felt a sense of pride swell in his chest. The Ketheri were not just surviving anymore. They were beginning to thrive. And it was because of Earth's intervention. But he knew that the work was just beginning. They had made great strides, but the real test would come when they faced the challenges of rebuilding their civilization. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but Elias was determined to see it through. In the distance, the silhouette of the Liberty floated above the horizon, a symbol of Earth's commitment to the Ketheri. The ship would stay with them for as long as they needed, providing resources and assistance until the Ketheri were once again able to stand on their own. As the last light of the sun dipped below the horizon, Elias turned to Vela. This is only the beginning. We've got a long way to go, but we're in this together. Vela smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in years. Yes, together. The promise of a new dawn had begun to take shape, and for the first time in a long while, both Elias and Vela could see a future where the Ketheri would rise once more. Weeks turned into months. The collaboration between the Earth Alliance and the Ketheri grew stronger. Elias watched with admiration as the Ketheri not only accepted the new technology, but also began to enhance it with their own natural abilities. Their deep connection to the planet, their unique way of manipulating energy from the Earth, blended perfectly with the advanced Earth technology. It was as if the two worlds were destined to work together. The Ketheri people, once lost and broken, now held a new sense of purpose. The city of Havor, one of their largest settlements, was being slowly rebuilt, its streets once again filled with life. New buildings were rising from the ruins, designed with a mix of Ketheri elegance and Earth's modern efficiency. The air was cleaner, and the fields were abundant with crops that seemed to grow faster than anyone expected. Elias marveled at the progress they had made. It was hard to believe this planet had once been a wasteland. One evening, Elias found himself sitting in a meeting with Vela and several key leaders of the Ketheri. They had gathered to discuss the next phase of their recovery. The air in the room was charged with excitement, and Elias could sense the optimism among the Ketheri. For the first time in decades, they believed they could overcome the challenges they faced. We've come a long way, Vela said, standing at the head of the table. But there is still much to be done. We need to rebuild not just our cities, but our culture. The Ketheri were once a proud people, and I believe we can be again. We have the tools, the knowledge, and the strength to do this. Elias nodded, his eyes focused on her. And you have the support of Earth. We'll help you every step of the way. The Ketheri leaders exchanged glances, their faces filled with hope. It was clear that they had been waiting for someone to show them that they weren't alone in the universe. They weren't just a forgotten race anymore. They were valued, important, and capable of greatness. As the meeting continued, Elias couldn't help but feel a deep sense of pride. He had been part of something monumental. Not only had Earth extended a hand to an alien race in need, but they had also helped to heal the scars of a planet that had once been on the brink of collapse. The next few days were filled with more planning and discussions. New teams were formed to address various challenges, from rebuilding infrastructure to preserving the Ketheri's ancient traditions. Elias was involved in every step of the process, learning more about the Ketheri's history and their hopes for the future. One evening, as the sun began to set, Elias and Vela took a walk through the newly planted forests on the outskirts of the city. The trees, once mere saplings, were now reaching for the sky, their roots firmly grounded in the restored soil. It was a symbol of the Ketheri's revival, slow, steady, but unstoppable. "You've done something incredible here," Elias said, his voice filled with awe as he looked around at the thriving landscape. Vela smiled softly. "We've all done something incredible. The Earth Alliance, the Ketheri people, and you. You believed in us when no one else would." Elias shook his head. "I didn't do it alone. We're all in this together. Your people have the strength to build something even greater than before." Vela looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "I used to think we were a lost cause, but now I see a future where the Ketheri thrive once more, a future where we are not just surviving, but living." Elias felt a warmth spread through his chest. It wasn't just the success of their mission that made him proud. It was the people, their resilience, and their willingness to embrace change. He had seen firsthand how a broken world could rise again, and it gave him hope for humanity as well. The two stood in silence for a moment, taking in the view. The wind rustled through the trees, and the sounds of life. Birds singing, insects buzzing, the distant murmur of flowing water filled the air. It was peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos that had once consumed the planet. "Do you ever think about home?" Vela asked softly, breaking the silence. Elias nodded, his thoughts drifting to Earth. "Of course, every day. But I know that my home is not just the planet I came from. It's the work we're doing here. It's the people I'm working with. It's you." Vela's eyes softened, and she stepped closer to him. "You've become more than just a friend to the Ketheri. You've become part of our family." Elias smiled, touched by her words. "And you've become part of mine." As they stood together, looking out over the vibrant landscape they had helped restore, Elias realized just how far they had come. The journey was far from over, but they had laid the foundation for a future filled with promise. They had proven that even in the darkest times, there was always hope, if you were willing to fight for it. The days seemed to blur together as the work on Varellus continued. Elias felt a sense of fulfillment as the Ketheri people became more self-sufficient. Fields once barren now stretched across the horizon, filled with crops that thrived under the care of both Ketheri and Earth technology. The atmosphere continued to improve, and new buildings rose up from the rubble, each one a symbol of hope for the future. The Ketheri were no longer a forgotten race. They were a thriving civilization on the path to rebuilding. But just as things were beginning to settle into a hopeful rhythm, an unexpected visitor arrived. Elias was standing in the new central square of Hiver one morning when he was approached by Vela, her expression unusually serious. She motioned for him to follow, and they made their way toward the communications center. "What's going on?" Elias asked, sensing the change in her demeanor. "There's something you need to see," Vela replied, her voice tense. When they entered the communications center, Elias was greeted by the sight of a holographic projection of a fleet. It wasn't just any fleet. It was massive, with ships that were unlike anything he had ever seen. The ships were sleek and dark, their hulls gleaming under the light of distant stars. They had no insignia, no markings, nothing to identify them. "Who are they?" Elias asked, feeling a chill run down his spine. Vela's face grew pale as she studied the hologram. "We don't know, but they've been observing us for the past few weeks. They haven't made contact, but their presence is undeniable." Elias leaned closer to the projection, his mind racing. The fleet was unlike anything the Earth Alliance had. The ships were far more advanced. There was no mistaking that. "They must know we're rebuilding," he muttered, his hand resting on the table in front of him. "We're not just repairing a planet. We're bringing back a whole civilization. That must be a threat to someone." Vela nodded slowly. "The Ketheri have always been isolationist. We've stayed out of the affairs of the greater galaxy for centuries. But now, with the help of Earth, we are becoming a presence once again. We've been forgotten for so long, but this fleet, they don't want us to rise." Elias clenched his fists. "Are they going to attack?" "I don't know," Vela replied. "But we can't take the chance. We need to prepare. If they intend to stop our progress, we won't be able to face them unprepared." Elias knew that this was a turning point. Everything they had worked for, the fragile peace, the rebuilding of a civilization, could be threatened by this mysterious fleet. But they wouldn't back down. Not after everything the Ketheri had endured. "We'll need to alert Earth," Elias said, his voice steady despite the rising tension in his chest. "If this fleet is a threat, we need reinforcements." Vela agreed. "I will send a message to the Earth Alliance, but we must also prepare the Ketheri. We have to show them that we will not be intimidated. Our people have faced extinction before, but we have always fought to survive." Elias looked at her, his heart swelling with admiration. "You're right. We'll stand together, Earth and the Ketheri, united." The next few hours were spent in a flurry of activity. Vela sent the message to Earth, while Elias worked with the Ketheri military leaders to organize a defense strategy. It was a difficult task. The Ketheri didn't have a standing military like Earth, but they had their own form of defense, an intricate system of energy-based weapons based on their natural ability to manipulate energy from the planet. Elias had seen the Ketheri use this ability before, but he wasn't sure how it would hold up against the unknown technology of the fleet. Despite their uncertainty, the Ketheri were resolute. They would defend their home, no matter the cost. As the sun began to set over the city, Elias and Vela stood together on the rooftop of a newly constructed building, overlooking the vast plains. The wind was gentle, but there was an undeniable sense of foreboding in the air. "This is not how I imagined our future," Elias said quietly, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Vela turned to him, her eyes filled with determination. "We never imagined a future at all. But now we have something to protect, and we'll do whatever it takes to keep it." Elias nodded, his mind racing with thoughts of the fleet. He had seen the best of humanity, and the Ketheri working together, building something beautiful. He couldn't let that be destroyed. The future was uncertain now, but one thing was clear. Earth and the Ketheri would stand together against whatever threat came their way. They had already faced the darkness once before. They would do it again. And this time, they would not be forgotten. The following days were filled with tension, as the Earth Alliance prepared to respond to the mysterious fleet that was now tracking the Ketheri planet. Elias and Vela spent their time organizing the defenses for Hivor and coordinating with Earth military leaders. Despite the growing unease, there was something almost peaceful about the way the Ketheri handled the situation. It was as if they had faced uncertainty before and knew how to endure it. Elias had always believed that humanity was the most resourceful species in the galaxy, but as he watched the Ketheri work together, his perspective began to shift. The Ketheri had faced their own struggles for survival, decades of being forgotten, isolated, and nearly wiped out. And yet they stood strong. They were a people who understood the power of perseverance. And now, with Earth's help, they were prepared to defend their future. The Ketheri had shared their methods of harnessing the planet's energy, and Elias had worked alongside their best engineers to enhance their technology. The result was a hybrid system that used Earth's advanced weapons, combined with the Ketheri's energy manipulation abilities, to create a powerful defense shield around their most important cities. It was a fragile system, but it was the best they could do with the limited resources they had. Elias sat in the command center one evening, reviewing the final plans for their defense. His mind was sharp, focused on the task at hand, but there was a part of him that couldn't shake the feeling of impending danger. The fleet was still out there, somewhere in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. He knew that no matter how much preparation they did, they could not predict what would come next. Vela entered the room, her expression calm but carrying an air of urgency. "Elias, we've received a message from the Earth Alliance. They're sending reinforcements, but it will take time for them to arrive." Elias looked up from the screen, his brow furrowed. "How much time?" "Days, maybe a week. The fleet is still in the outer reaches of the system, but they're closing in. We don't have much time." Elias nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "We can't afford to wait. We'll have to make do with what we have." Vela's eyes met his, and for a moment, the weight of everything that had happened settled between them. They were both fully aware that the survival of the Ketheri was in their hands, and yet there was no fear in her gaze, only determination. "We will protect our people," Vela said quietly, "and we will not back down." Elias stood, the resolve settling in his chest. "I've seen what your people can do, Vela. And with Earth's help, we're not just going to defend this planet. We're going to show them that we're ready for whatever they throw at us." As the night wore on, the team continued their work. Engineers adjusted the shield generators, and soldiers trained with the new hybrid weapons. Everyone knew the stakes were high, but they worked with a sense of purpose that gave Elias hope. The Ketheri, once a scattered and forgotten race, were now standing tall, united with humanity in a fight for their future. Later that night, as Elias walked through the streets of Hyvor, he saw the changes firsthand. The city was alive with activity, the hum of energy in the air as buildings were lit up by the new power systems. The streets, once dark and quiet, were now bustling with people. The sounds of laughter and conversation filled the air, a sharp contrast to the quiet despair that had once ruled the city. The Ketheri were no longer hiding in the shadows. They were stepping into the light. Elias paused near a small park where children were playing among the trees that had recently been planted. He watched them for a moment, feeling a sense of peace. Despite the looming threat, there was something about the innocence of the children that reminded him why they were fighting. This was about more than just survival. It was about giving the Ketheri a chance to thrive, to live freely without fear. Vela joined him a few moments later, her presence a quiet comfort. "It's strange," she said, her voice thoughtful. "For so long, we've lived in fear, not knowing if we would survive. And now, when we finally have a chance at peace, we face this threat." Elias turned to face her, his gaze softening. "That's the thing about peace. It's never easy, but it's worth fighting for." Vela smiled, the weight of their mission reflected in her eyes. "You're right. We fought for so long to be free. Now we fight for a future." As the stars began to twinkle in the dark sky, Elias and Vela stood together, watching the people of Hyvor go about their lives. They knew the battle was coming, but they also knew that they weren't fighting alone. Earth and the Ketheri had come together for something greater than themselves, and no matter what happened, they would stand strong. The calm before the storm was almost unbearable, but it was also a reminder that they had made it this far, together. And no matter what the mysterious fleet had planned, Elias knew one thing for sure: the Ketheri would not be abandoned again. The day had finally arrived. The tension that had been building over the past week had reached its peak. The mysterious fleet, still hidden at the edge of the system, had made its move. It was no longer just a shadow in the distance. It was here. And with it came the uncertainty of what the future would hold for the Ketheri and their new allies, the people of Earth. Elias stood on the command deck of the newly constructed Ketheri flagship, looking out at the stars through the large viewport. The fleet was coming. But this time, they were ready. "Everything's in place," Vela said, joining him at the window. Her voice was calm, but Elias could sense the quiet storm brewing inside her. It wasn't fear, it was determination. She was ready for this fight. "We've done all we can," Elias replied. "Now we stand together, Earth and the Ketheri, united." The message had been clear. The fleet had not attempted communication, and they had shown no signs of diplomacy. They had come to conquer. And the Ketheri were not going to let that happen. With Earth's advanced technology and the Ketheri's energy-based weapons, they were more than a match for whatever threat lay ahead. The first wave of the fleet arrived in the Ketheri system, their ships moving with deadly precision. Elias watched as the holographic displays in the command center showed the enemy vessels moving closer. The Ketheri had deployed their defense shields around key cities, and Earth's fleet was now in position to provide support. "We won't be able to hold them back forever," one of the Ketheri commanders said, his voice steady but concerned. "They're too many." "We don't have to hold them back forever," Elias replied, his voice strong. "We just need to delay them long enough for Earth to strike." The fleet from Earth was much smaller in number, but their ships were far more advanced. They were equipped with weapons that the Ketheri had never seen before, laser cannons that could disintegrate entire ships with a single shot, and energy shields that could withstand the most powerful enemy fire. But it wasn't just the technology that gave Elias confidence. It was the spirit of the Ketheri people. They had faced impossible odds before and had survived. And they weren't about to let that fight end now. The first battle was fierce. The enemy ships unleashed a barrage of firepower that shook the Ketheri ships to their core. But the Ketheri held their ground, using their energy manipulation skills to deflect some of the enemy's attacks. Earth's fleet provided the backup they needed, launching precise strikes that sent enemy ships tumbling into the depths of space. Elias stood at the command center, watching the battle unfold on the screens before him. He could feel his heart racing, the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He knew that the outcome of this battle would decide everything. The Ketheri's future, their survival. It all depended on this. "Reinforcements from Earth are coming in fast," Vela said, her voice carrying over the noise in the command center. "We're holding them off, but we need more time." Elias nodded. The enemy fleet wasn't giving up, and they were relentless. But the Ketheri weren't backing down either. The battle raged on, each side exchanging blows. The space between them lit up with flashes of light and bursts of energy. Suddenly, a new wave of enemy ships appeared on the horizon, larger and more menacing than the first. Elias's stomach twisted. This was what they had been fearing, an overwhelming force that could crush everything they had worked for. "Get the backup generators online," one of the Ketheri engineers shouted, running through the command center. "We need more power." Elias gritted his teeth. He knew they had to hold on just a little longer. Earth's reinforcements had to be close, and they couldn't afford to lose ground now. With a fierce cry, the Ketheri soldiers launched another wave of energy-based attacks, sending waves of energy streaking across the battlefield. Earth's ships fired in perfect synchrony, their laser beams cutting through the enemy ships like butter. It was a stunning display of strength and unity. The two forces, Earth and the Ketheri, fighting side by side, a symbol of what they had built together. Then, a breakthrough. The enemy fleet began to retreat. Elias watched in disbelief as the massive ships that had once seemed so invincible started pulling back. The battle was not over, but the tide had shifted. They had done it. They had pushed back the invaders. The command center erupted in cheers. Vela turned to Elias, her eyes wide with relief. "We did it." Elias exhaled, his body finally able to relax. He had been holding his breath through the entire battle, his thoughts focused on nothing but survival. But now, as the enemy fleet retreated into the dark reaches of space, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. "We did it," Elias repeated, a smile tugging at his lips. "But we're not done yet." The battle had been won, but it wasn't the end. The fleet that had tried to destroy the Ketheri had been driven off. But the galaxy was vast, and there would always be new challenges ahead. But now, Elias knew that the Ketheri were no longer alone. They had allies, and together, they could face whatever the future held. As he looked out at the stars once more, Elias knew that the Ketheri's future was no longer uncertain. They had a place in the galaxy, and they would fight to protect it.